Hey, what's up guys? Today I have a very special video for you where I have the privilege of having early access to Durin. Because of this, I plan on showing you guys what Durin actually does, what you can expect from the character, and show you guys a showcase of him in many different teams. As you will see, Durin is a very versatile pyro unit, the newest character coming out in version Luna 3 that has been long awaited by many, myself included. Durin is a very unique character that I'm excited to show off to you guys, and as always, if you're wondering, a complete Durin guide will come out after his official release, but for now, I'm gonna give you guys a early and brief summary of what he does and then focus most of the video on a showcase as well as a review of the character, at least through my early gameplay. With that said, do keep in mind that everything you're seeing is from the creator experience server, so some exact details may change for the live release. I was also provided with a code you can redeem for some in-game rewards, namely 60 primogems and some adventure XP. That's on screen now and in the description. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. Alright, so starting things off, to give you guys a brief rundown of what Durin actually does, just to understand his kit a bit before getting into a showcase and review, the gist of it is as follows. Durin is a character with two different modes, either white mode or dark mode. Durin can choose which mode he's in by using his elemental skill, and then using his skill again to enter white mode, or using a normal attack instead to enter dark mode. Now, for the majority of his kit, however, what Durin will actually do will depend on the mode he's in after using his elemental burst. In fact, regardless of which state he's in, Durin will do just a little bit of AoE pyro damage initially, and then summon a dragon either of white flame or dark decay to attack alongside of the active character, dealing pyro damage from off field. If Durin is inside of the white form, this pyro damage will be AoE and will attack more rapidly. If Durin is inside of the dark mode, this pyro damage will be a little bit stronger, it'll deal more damage, but it will be single target instead of AoE and will also attack a bit slower. Now, the most important part of these abilities though are the fact that Durin lets you apply pyro from off field relatively rapidly while also having this burst last for a very long time, being actually 20 whole seconds. If that wasn't enough, after using Durin's burst, Durin will trigger different buffs depending on which form he is when he uses said burst. In fact, if he's in white mode, Durin will give you some much appreciated res shred. As you trigger any pyro reaction other than vaporize or melt, so namely overload, pyro swirl, pyro crystallize, or burning, and this includes reapplying burning, then the pyro res as well as the resistance of any other element that was involved in the reaction will be decreased by 20%. This is really nice because it will increase your pyro damage and whatever other element you're playing when you're using Durin as this white mode support. If Durin is in dark mode, however, then instead of offering you res shred to the other reactions, Durin will gain increased vaporize and melt damage, which if you've noticed are the two reactions that aren't affected by his white mode res shred. This damage increase will be by 40%, which allows Durin to be a very powerful sub DPS or even carry, but we'll get into that later, inside of these vape and melt teams. If that wasn't enough, if you do play Durin with another Hexray character, which basically is a witch character, one of the mod-side characters that is getting these new buffs that you may have heard about and that I also plan on covering, then these buffs that Durin gets will be increased by 75%. This means that the res shred will go from 20% to 35%, and his vape and melt damage will go from 40 to 70%. This means that Durin will have more synergy with these other Hexray characters, as you'll get this kind of witch team resonance if you have two of them in your team, Durin and another, and this will not only increase Durin's buffs, but it will also enable the Hexarray buffs to whatever other newly buffed character you're running. It enables their Hexarray effects because you'll have two of these party members in your team, increasing the value of these other characters you can run, which means that in practice, it just gives Durin a lot more synergy with certain newly buffed characters, like namely Fischl, whom I really love, but also Mona, Albedo, and others that we'll cover as well. This makes it to where you can now have a strong team core by running Durin and another one of these witch characters without it being a mandatory requirement. It's just another strong option for a lot of his teams. He really is one of the most versatile characters because of the fact that he applies off-field pyro very consistently, has solid personal damage too, and will also give you res shred to pyro and other elements as well in his white mode, or will instead increase his vape and melt damage in his dark mode. Now there is a bit more nuance to that than Durin's kit, more things to cover, another passive that will increase his damage, but all of this I'll save for my more complete in-depth guide coming out after his official release. For now though, I wanted to give you guys the gist of what Durin does before getting into a showcase showing you what Durin actually can do in action against various enemies and in various different teams. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's get into arguably the most important part, or I guess the part I'm the most excited for of this video, which is showing off Durin in different content and in a plethora of different teams. A few important things to note are that number one, we'll be including a mix of both world boss clears and also Abyss content, the newest floor 12, to give you guys a variety of content, and also because the next Abyss that you're gonna see either has a bit of annoying enemies on the second half for Durin, or gives you a pyro damage buff if you're off field only in the first half. So I'm gonna try to give you guys a showcase kind of without the buffs and then also with them in a bunch of different content in a bunch of different teams, items to kind of just show all of that off. Keep in mind my Durin, and this is important, will always be on a 4-star weapon, and I started on Finale of the Deep, the Fontanian craftable weapon, and it's good, but I noticed that in some teams, it's difficult to remove the Bond of Life to actually get the most value out of the weapon, so then I switched over to a R1 Wolf's Fang, which is a solid 4-star overall. It's the Battle Pass weapon, and I kept it unrefined to leave some room for upgrades. Obviously, a 5-star stat stick or even his signature weapon would be better than this, but I wanted to just use a pretty solid and generic 4-star weapon that works for him. And also, I did want to use Lion's Roar for overload teams, which is a pretty common 4-star, but this account doesn't have it, so yeah. Regarding everything else, talents are all level 9. All the 5-stars you're seeing, including Durin, are C0, with the 4-stars being C6. Other characters will be running basically the best weapon or whatever works, so either a supportive weapon that makes sense for the team, or for DPSs, they'll be running a good option for them, generally their best, so kind of like C0 R1 for other characters. And artifact set wise, for Durin, it actually will vary based on the team. There's a lot of different sets that are the best depending on the team you're running, so stay tuned for my guide on Durin coming soon for the nuance of that. For the most part, he's on Noblesse Oblige if no one else is on it, but in some showcase teams, he's on more offensive options, which I'll mention when we get there. So with all that yapping out of the way, here's a showcase of a C0 Durin on a 4-star weapon in some different content that I will commentate over. And regardless though, obviously exact damage numbers will vary based on build and you, but showing his synergy in all these different teams and how it works is the main point of this section, so let's go. All right, so let's actually get into it. So I'm going to be using some overworld bosses as test dummies at the start before moving into the Abyss stuff. The first few clips you're seeing here are going to be with a white mode Durin, using skill twice and then burst, primarily for the res shred. We're starting with a Veresa team, pretty standard. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the teams you're seeing are going to have some flex slots. Obviously, here you could use Fischl instead of Janssen, although Janssen works really well with Veresa, and Veresa's just doing amazing. These are Veresa things. It's not like you need Durin for her, but obviously it works. And this same team archetype can use so many different carries. So here we're using similar team format, but with Chlorinde as the main DPS, and obviously Fischl here, who works really well with Durin thanks to the Hex Array kind of synergy. Obviously, Fischl's just a broken unit on her own though, but even better with the Hex Array synergy here. And yeah, so Chlorinde as the main DPS, obviously one rotates this boss. Now we're doing Arlecchino. So again, we're cycling through different DPSs. So many, it's just a team archetype that works really well. Durin works as an off-field pyro character in these overload team comps. And here's an Arlecchino team with Chevreuse just clearing the boss quite easily. Now with this Arlecchino team, I actually redid it without Chevreuse because maybe you don't have her, and obviously she's the best unit to use there in an overload team. But if you don't have her, here's an example of a boss fight without her. And obviously we're doing a bit less damage, but it's still doing fine. Yes, Bennett's a support you might want on your other team, but if you don't have her, this is just something that still worked, although overload teams in general are less recommended without Chevreuse. But yeah, here's a team that's a different archetype. It's actually just Navia, because as you will see, the point of this section is showing so many different teams where Durin works. I'm trying to explain all of this, before the clip ends, but yeah, Navia works well here. You can use Albedo again. Now Albedo's buffed with the Hex Array synergy. If you don't have him, that's okay. Shilonin works here, or even Chiori. The exact team slots are flexible. I'll go over this in my guide, but yeah, their exact team is not something you need to copy. They're just example teams that work. Here I'm using Chaska, again, another character that works really well with Durin. I did like using Fischl here, Janssen as well, but you can also use like Bennett, or maybe get some Overvape with a Hydro and Pyro unit, well, Durin being the Pyro. And here I'm using Kanich with Durin and Janssen. Again, super flexible teams. Albedo works as well, Bennett works, etc, etc. Durin's not a must, but he works really well with Kanich as just a super strong off-fielder. As you can see, he applies a good amount of Pyro to get consistent burning on Kanich, and then the Res Shred is super valuable to help increase his damage. He's also running Noblesse Oblige and does solid off-field damage himself as well. It doesn't look like much, but it does add up on top of, everything else that he gives you. Here, I did a clear with Xiao just because I kind of want to. I'll get a better one when he's out on the live server because my Xiao is, better investment, but yeah. This, we're doing 100k plunges, 110k. It's respectable. I love Xiao, so I felt the need to use a clip here because, again, the point is that Durin can be played in so many teams. The Anemo carry could be Wanderer. You could use, obviously, other characters, but yeah, that was just a Xiao clear. Here is a team of Flins without Inefa. Now, I want to point something out that Flins without Inefa kind of got a buff thanks to the Hex Array resonance. You can actually use Fischl and Sucrose. So this isn't a team where you need Durin, but it is a team that you can run. And if you want to play Durin with Flins, you can use this team, but if you have Inefa, you can use Inefa too, and obviously Inefa should make it better because she's broken. But yeah, this is just an example of a team with Flins and Durin. Here we're using another overload carry. This is actually going to be Klee. Yeah, I wrote down kind of what you're seeing, the artifact set and all of that stuff on the bottom of the screen. But yeah, we're just playing Klee. Keep in mind, you have to do some more Klee testing. I might make a video if you guys are interested on the Hex Array synergies, the new kind of buffed characters. So stay tuned if you want that. Let me know. And my Klee gameplay might improve because honestly, I haven't played much Klee. But yeah, here I'm using Raiden, another overload team This is a C0 Raiden on engulfing, I believe. You know, Raiden's not the most broken unit anymore, but it still works. So we have good electro damage from Fischl, good power damage from Durin, and then obviously Raiden on field doing solid personal damage as well and giving us energy. Here I'm using Durin as a main DPS, another playstyle that he can, you know, be played in, I guess. Basically just using his skill, using his burst, and doing normal attacks and charge attacks. And honestly, it's not a bad team at all. Pretty solid. If you just want to play him as a DPS, he's an option, and I like this flexibility of Durin. I'll actually show a team that I liked even more, which was this Overvape Durin team using only 4-star characters. Don't get me wrong, Durin's great in an overload team as well. I did have fun with this one though, just because I like seeing big numbers. So here what you're seeing is the first actually dark mode Durin gameplay. I used skill on him and then an auto attack to enter dark mode, use a burst, and now my vaporizes are going to do more damage. We're over vaping with a fast hydro plier like Xingqiu, doing a normal attack and a charge attack to try to vape our charge attacks. And yeah, we basically just spam that, rinse and repeat. Now I am cognizant that this clear didn't look the best. I promise you there will be a better one in the Abyss. The exact slots here you're using do vary. It actually will be one with Farina, but yeah, for a bunch of 4-stars this works pretty well. And Durin's actually a good on-field power DPS, and he has good synergy with Mona in a double hydro team, especially if you have her constellations like C1, C2, and even later ones. But these are just kind of two clips to show that Durin can work as an on-fielder either in overload or even vaporize. Now outside of that, we're now going to move on to the Abyss, where as I mentioned, first half does give an off-field pyro damage buff, 75% pyro damage bonus if the character is off-field. But here what we're doing is actually a Burgeon team. So this first chamber is actually super AoE, so it's really good for Burgeon and Neuvillette. And also I want to point out that Burgeon is a reaction that does Dendro damage, and so pyro damage bonus doesn't affect it. Actually, it wouldn't affect it even if it were Dendro. So it mainly will just buff like Durin's stray vaporize hits here and there, which adds up. But my Durin here is on a full elemental mastery, kind of a reaction focused build. He's the Burgeon trigger, and as you'll see, I'll pause somewhere. The Burgeon damage of like 48,000 is a lot higher than the random like 2,000 hits that we're doing. You know, if we crit, it'll be a bit higher, but yeah, regardless, it's a full EM Durin. Here we're running Iron Sting, Flowers of Paradise Lost, and yeah, it's Neuvillette doing a bunch of damage, and also the Burgeon reaction from Durin and Lauma, who buffs it, doing a ton of damage as well. I do want to mention that I believe I have Deepwood Memories on Lauma in this team. So yeah, we're shredding Dendro, and this is a team that performs fine basically anywhere, but is a lot better in AoE because of the nature of Burgeon, right? Bloom focused teams, notably Burgeon, work really, really well in AoE, and so does Neuvillette. So another one of Neuvillette's best teams has been spawned. Neuvillette gets a new basically best team competitor with almost any support that comes out. So now this is another one that works exceptionally well in AoE. Just another team option, obviously, like Inefo works instead of Durin, and you don't actually have to do Burgeon if you don't want to. If you want to play Neuvillette with Durin, you can with a super flexible last slot, like Fischl, Albedo, or Sucrose if you want Hexarray, or just any generic support. So outside of that, let's skip past. The rest of this clear is just one spinning enemy that's kind of annoying. For the next one, I actually did a Mwalani clear here with White Mode Durin to give us some res shred and off-field pyro application, who works really well with Mwalani, honestly. And the exact team here is very flexible. This is a double Geo one, and again, this is actually on the second half of the Abyss, so there is no damage buff to pyro. It's actually just a plunge attack damage buff, but obviously that's not something that like Mwalani or Durin will really benefit from. Albedo works well here, but you can also use Mona, and there's even some teams with like Sucrose. You can do Mona, Sucrose without even needing Durin with another pyro. But yeah, Durin works well here, and as you can see, our Mwalani is vaping for, you know, a pretty big number relative to our build. The exact number will vary, but yeah, Durin's doing this res shred, giving us some buffs and also doing some off-field power damage. The shield just came up, so I cut me plunging and destroying it, and then here's another vape from Mwalani, and it clears this enemy. Again, just showing off teams that work primarily. Now here we're back in the first half. Here I'm actually going to make use of the pyro damage buff that the Abyss floor gives us, so a 75% pyro damage bonus, because I feel like in this showcase I should show the content that is designed for Durin and then more like normal content. So I kind of showed the quote-unquote normal content. Here is the first half of the Abyss where Durin should feel stronger because we get a bit more pyro damage bonus, although obviously it's still a Varessa focused team. It's her who will be doing most of the team's damage, as you can see by her plunges, and we clear like 2 waves of enemies really fast there. I actually one rotate this entire floor, which has 3 waves of enemies, or this entire chamber, I guess. And yeah, this Varessa burst should take him out. Boom, that was pretty easy. Obviously the Varessa has good investment and stuff. And now 12-3, again, this is the enemy that is kind of shield towards Durin. So there's a big pyro shield you have to break, or I guess cryo shield, but before that you have to fill up a pyro meter. Anyways, you'll see when it's out. And then I believe after you break this cryo shield, he loses his resistances. So we will be doing more damage, but we won't be making use for the most part of the off-field pyro damage bonus because our Durin is on field. So, well, there he's off field, and then that damage that you just saw wasn't Durin. It was actually from breaking the shield. And then after I go to Fischl, I stay on my Durin on field. And as you can see, we're going to be playing a overvape team. So I want to talk about this because it's actually a really cool one. Now, typically with Farina, her hydro application isn't the fastest. So you can run 2 hydro units like maybe Mona, especially with constellations, or you can run a faster hydro plier like Xingqiu, or potentially Yelan, although I have to do more testing. With that said, what Furina gives Durin is letting you run a real artifact set, the 4-piece Maréchaussée Hunter, which is really nice to get you a ton of stats and therefore a lot of value. Because of this, if you can run her with a healer, it's great, and you can do either double Hydro or overvape, which is what I'm doing here. And here I actually managed to still get pretty good uptime on the Hydro Aura and get a lot of vaporizes. So here we do 196k. Here I'm doing normal attack, charge attack, normal attack, charge attack. There it went Pyro, then Electro, so I missed a couple of vapes, but then boom, I get a vaporize for 200k, another 100k, and then I get another vaporize here, 200k. I know I paused a lot just to show kind of the big numbers, but I'll replay the whole thing without pausing. Again, I don't think solo Furina is the most consistent form of Hydro, but hey, it worked here. And if you want to change your team around, I'll go over it a bit more in the guide video after more testing is done. That's just a clear that I did. But yeah, double Hydro is something you can do, or a faster Hydro applier if you need it. Here, I just wanted to show a funny number I got, making use of the off-field Pyro buff. But yeah, thanks to the off-field Pyro buff and Mona's buffs as well. This is C0 Mona. I got 300k there on Durin, so I thought I should include it because I was doing some testing with a double Hydro team. The whole clear there though wasn't great, so I'm not going to include it. I just wanted to show the funny number because I can. Outside of that, here is Knight against this same enemy. Now, again, there is off-field power damage bonus that will help our Durin, but as you will see, our Knight will be doing so much damage that will clear before our rotation's even over. 400k there, thanks to the enemy losing some resistances, Durin's Res Shred as well, and also Yansan, the scroll set, Noblesse Oblige, and the newly buffed Albedo too, making this Knight team very strong. We have another cannon shot here. We could have optimized the rotation even further if we needed to. And then, because I like including a mix of content where we're buffed and content where we're unbuffed, I thought I'd end on kind of the latter, where we're using Arlecchino Overload in the second half of the Abyss that does not have a Pyro buff. So our off-field Durin will not gain Pyro damage bonus. The only buff is to plunge attacks, which I tried not to implement. So as you'll see, this is just kind of a standard Overload team using Arlecchino as a carry. I use my Durin's ult, swap to Arlecchino, and again, we're on the second half of the Abyss, and I'm fighting this enemy kind of as simply as I can, just spamming normal attacks. I actually managed to get a second Bond of Life cooking, because against this enemy, if you're playing Arlecchino, you can actually kind of cook 2 Bond of Life, because you can set it up kind of while you're breaking the shield. As you can see, there's already one there, kind of waiting for my Arlecchino whenever I'm ready. So making the most of the enemy. But yeah, I'll stop like rewinding and stuff. Here's just a full clear against this enemy, doing some solid Pyro hits. It's not the biggest numbers, but it adds up, right? It's Arlecchino and Durin and Fischl, 3 damage dealing characters, and then boom, I stuck another Bond of Life, so my damage is a lot higher. And then here, actually, I'll stop pausing. I'll just let the editing do the trick. So I'm sure you're rewatching it. I actually let myself get hit by the first shockwave because I didn't want to plunge, because you get a 75% plunge damage bonus on the second half. I wanted to try not to include it, but I would have died if I tanked the second one. So you'll see the buffed plunge as the last kind of hit, but obviously the boss is like 1 HP, so it doesn't matter. If you want to see it though, there it is. So I hope that was a good kind of showcase of a bunch of different content, overworld bosses, and then Abyss clears where we either get some buffs or don't, depending on what we're doing. Obviously, there's still Abyss cards. I don't think I had the best ones, but yeah, obviously Abyss is something you guys will be doing when it's out. So I feel like it's relevant to show, and maybe I'm overthinking this. I try to include so many different things that I know I can't fit in my guide that'll come out next, because if not, it'll be like an hour long. So I tried to include so much here that I hope you appreciate. Again, a lot of these are just team archetypes. You can choose what works for you. You can replace certain characters, and the exact damage you're doing will vary based on your weapon, constellations, teams, all of that. So yeah, mostly just a proof of concept, showing him with different teams, showing you how versatile he is and how it can work, you know, either against overworld bosses or in the Abyss. That's the next Abyss rotation that's coming out. And so yeah, there's obviously a lot more teams that I still have to test, more teams you can use, right? Different overload carries, different melt carries, other archetypes, etc., etc. But I hope I did a good job at showcasing some of Durin's very, very vast team selection. Now, to give you guys my initial review and first impressions on Durin, here are my thoughts so far. Durin is an off-field pyro character who, as we saw, has incredibly versatile teams. He can fit in almost any team that wants an off-field pyro, and can even be played as a carry as well, but he is for the most part a very generalistic support, offering you res shred, pyro damage, and also good pyro application with a long burst duration of 20 seconds, meaning that you don't have to swap into him as often, and being so versatile that it's kind of reminiscent of one of the older supports, right? Thinking back to like Furina's release, where she can be played in so many teams, more so than some of the newer supports like Escoffier, that is still very strong, but is a bit more tied to a specific reaction and just a few team archetypes. Because of this versatility that Durin has, it makes him a valuable character for not just newer accounts that want a flexible supportive option and someone who can even be used as a DPS if you want, but also his exact value will vary based on what teams you're playing him with. In some teams, he'll be incredibly valuable, buffing some more forgotten older units, and even especially the hex array characters that he synergizes so well with, enabling this sort of witch resonance and synergizing with these characters as we saw like Fischl, Albedo, Mona, Klee, Venti, and just anyone in the hex array. And then in other teams, he might just be a good and solid option. I really do like like him in basically every Overload team I've played him in, but there's a lot more that we saw in the last section and that I'll cover in my guide as well. So yeah, very versatile. Overall, it does seem like as an off-field pyro sub DPS, he's somewhat of a side grade to Mawika, with the exact value varying. As a pure off-fielder, it does seem like Durin can do more damage if you were to play both of these characters as just pure sub DPSs that you use their skill and burst on and then swap out. But if you spend some time on Mawika and do one of her newly optimized combos, rotating a little bit on her before going back to your other carry, she can potentially be better there depending on your team and rotation. The point is that Durin being a comparable sub DPS, a side grade if you will, to Mawika when she's played as a sub DPS is obviously a big feat. Now, obviously don't forget that Mawika is the best DPS in the game as an on-fielder, but I'm saying that purely as off-fielders, Durin as a pyro support can provide you with similar or sometimes more value. And also, and more importantly, you probably are going to want to use Mawika as a main DPS in one of your teams, for example, in the Spiral Abyss or the Stygian Onslaught, if you do have her. And if that's the case, then you can use Durin as your off-field pyro for another team that you're running, where he will either be a great or the best option. And then outside of Mawika, Durin obviously outshines all of the other kind of off-field pyros, although Xiangling's still a great 4-star, notably for Vay, but Durin in general just offers you so much and is so versatile. Durin's damage is something that can be kind of overlooked because it's not as flashy, it's not just one big hit, but it's consistent hits of pyro damage from off-field that either will get buffed if you're vaping or melting in dark mode, or in white mode will still get buffed by his res shred to pyro and whatever other elements you're reacting with, which is genuinely a big deal because on top of the res shred and elemental application he gives you, on top of buffs through a potential supportive artifact set, Durin also just has good personal damage that I wanted to re-emphasize in this section as well. This means that he can kind of be a sleeper carry, someone carrying your team from off field as being one of your main sources of damage, or just someone who complements your DPS by doing a bit extra that really does add up over time, because if you build him properly, his damage will not be small. Now, outside of just that though, there are some other things I want to mention. Firstly, Durin's a character that obviously has upgrades with constellations and his signature weapon, but it is important to mention that they're not needed. Durin's base kit gives you so much, and his signature weapon, while it does have an attack buff to your teammates, it isn't that necessary on Durin, and any generic 5-star stat stick you may have is not too far behind, at least for his personal damage. Outside of that, he may have some future synergies that we obviously don't know yet, but because Varka, Alice, and Nicole are probably Hexarray characters, like they're very much tied to this witch, Mondstadt, Hexarray lore stuff, I believe there's a high chance that Durin works with them and maybe synergizes with them in some particular way. Outside of that, while Durin right now can run many different artifact sets, and the most generic one I'd say is Noblesse Oblige, but again, wait for my guide for more info on that, there is a chance that a future set comes out that suits him more, maybe for Hexarray characters or just him, but this one is a bit more uncertain than potential future synergies. Overall though, I don't want this video to be too long, so just to recap, I want to say that Durin does feel like a generalistic pyro character, a character that I very much appreciate, who's a super flexible and versatile support, who can either be super valuable for some teams or just a solid option in others, typically being not someone that you need because again, a lot of the times he can be a Mawika side grade, so maybe you don't need him. Do not feel forced to get him. I want to include this disclosure so no one gets kind of baited, but I do think if you like him or have teams where he can fit, he will be a great option, and he's someone that I'm very happy with. He doesn't break the game, he doesn't raise every team's power level by an absurd amount, he just works particularly well with a certain few teams, and then also just works well in general with almost any team where he can fit, and there are a lot. But yeah, I kind of want to leave it at that. I'm very happy with Durin and his versatility and power level overall, really good and strong without like ruining the game's balance. He's also very flexible, which is always a very nice thing, as I'm less a fan of the kind of niche support design, so quite pleased with Durin and his synergy with so many characters. With that said, do stay tuned for my complete Durin guide that will be out shortly after his release. There's actually a lot to cover, so it may take longer than expected, so please stay tuned and subscribe if you want to catch it as it goes out. And once again, I'm super grateful I got to give you guys this early Durin gameplay from the creator experience server, but stay tuned for the live release in case anything changes, which I will update you guys on. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.